The morning rush was in full swing when it happened. Steam rose from espresso machines, conversations overlapped in low murmurs, and the scent of fresh pastries filled the air at the Sterling, one of downtown's most exclusive cafes. Jack Matthews moved between tables with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. His uniform was pressed, his movements efficient, his face neutral, but his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the coffee pot, and his eyes kept drifting toward table 7. The reservation list had come through at 6 that morning. He had seen the name immediately: Elena Fitzgerald, Chief Executive Officer of Fitzgerald Industries. The woman whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose decisions moved markets, whose reputation for ruthlessness was legendary, and the woman whose name he had whispered into the darkness for 10 years, wondering if he would ever see her again. Jack was 38 years old, though the lines around his eyes made him look older. Single father. Former firefighter. Current waiter at a restaurant where the cheapest entree cost more than his weekly grocery budget. His daughter Lily was 7, with a congenital heart defect that required constant monitoring and would eventually need surgery they could not afford. He had taken this job 6 months ago because the tips were good and the schedule allowed him to be home when Lily finished her treatments. He had never expected to see Elena Fitzgerald walk through those doors. She arrived at exactly 8:30, flanked by 2 assistants and trailing the kind of presence that made conversations pause. She was younger than the photograph suggested, perhaps 35, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She wore white, an immaculate ivory suit that probably cost more than Jack's rent. She moved like someone who had never questioned her right to occupy space. Jack watched from behind the counter as she settled into her seat, dismissing her assistants with a gesture. She was meeting someone important. The manager had told them, a potential merger worth hundreds of millions. Everything had to be perfect. Jack poured the coffee. His hands were steady now. He had made his decision 3 days ago, after the letter arrived. After he learned the truth about the fire, after he realized that some silences were more dangerous than any words, he walked toward table 7. The cafe seemed to narrow around him, sounds becoming distant, his focus absolute. Elena was reading something on her tablet, one finger scrolling with precise movements. She did not look up as he approached. Jack reached the table. He lifted the coffee pot, and then, with deliberate care, he tilted his wrist and let the entire contents spill across Elena's immaculate white suit. The cafe went silent. Coffee spread across the table, dripped onto the floor, stained the white fabric a deep, irreversible brown. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping back, her face transforming from shock to fury in the span of a heartbeat. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward them. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a fork. The manager started moving, but seemed frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Jack did not move. He stood there, the empty pot in his hand, looking directly into Elena's eyes. He did not apologize. He did not grovel. His expression held something that made the fury in her face falter for just a moment. Not fear, not regret, something closer to determination. Or maybe recognition. Elena's voice, when it came, was ice. "Get the manager." Now, the manager arrived, already apologizing, already promising that Jack would be terminated immediately, already offering dry cleaning and compensation and anything else that might placate the most powerful woman in the room. But Elena was not listening. She was looking at Jack, really looking at him now, her analytical mind, trying to solve a puzzle she had not known existed. Why would a waiter deliberately destroy his own livelihood? Why would he look at her not with fear, but with something almost like expectation? Jack bent down to retrieve the fallen napkins. As he did, something slipped from his uniform pocket. A photograph, small and worn, landed face up on the wet floor between them. Elena's eyes dropped to it automatically. Then her entire body went rigid. The photograph showed a hospital room. In it, a younger Elena sat beside a bed where a small child lay sleeping, tubes and monitors surrounding them both. The image was grainy, taken from a doorway perhaps, but unmistakable. The child in the bed had Elena's eyes. And standing in the background, barely visible, was a man in a firefighter's uniform. The coffee dripped. The cafe hummed with whispers. But Elena heard none of it. Her mind had traveled back 10 years. To a night that still haunted her dreams. To a decision that had shaped every day since. She looked up at Jack, and this time, she really saw him. The shape of his jaw. The scar above his left eyebrow. The way he stood, balanced on the balls of his feet like someone trained to move quickly in an emergency. Her voice came out hoarse, wet. The manager paused, confused. Elena's assistants exchanged glances. Jack straightened slowly, meeting her gaze. "Everyone out," Elena said quietly. "Clear this section, now." The manager began to protest about the meeting, the merger, the importance of maintaining schedule. Elena turned to look at him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him close his mouth and begin ushering people away. Within minutes, they were alone. Elena and Jack, standing in a pool of spilled coffee, separated by 10 years of silence and a photograph that should not exist. Elena picked up the photo with fingers that shook slightly. She stared at it for a long moment, then raised her eyes to Jack. The back room. 5 minutes. She walked away without waiting for an answer. Her stained suit leaving a trail of drops across the marble floor. Jack watched her go, then bent to retrieve the coffee pot. His hands were shaking now too. The private room at the Sterling was used for business meetings that required discretion. Soundproofed walls, expensive furniture. A view of the city that reminded powerful people of how high they had climbed. Elena stood at the window, her back to the door, when Jack entered. She did not turn around, close the door. He did. The click of the lock seemed very loud. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the city moved at its relentless pace. But in this room, time felt suspended. Finally, Elena spoke. "Who are you?" Jack set the photograph on the table between them. "You know who I am. I know you deliberately threw away your job. I know you somehow have a photograph that should not exist. I know you want something from me." She turned now, and her face was controlled again. The momentary vulnerability locked away. "What I do not know is why." Jack did not sit, though she gestured to the chairs. He remained standing, maintaining the posture of someone prepared to be dismissed. "My name is Jack Matthews. 10 years ago, I was a firefighter, Engine Company 12. I responded to a call on the night of November 15th. Elena's expression did not change, but something in her posture tightened. "There was a fire at an apartment building on Lexington Avenue," Jack continued. "4th floor. A woman and a child were trapped. I went in. I got them out." He paused. "You were that woman. There were 3 firefighters that night," Elena said quietly. "I never learned their names. The hospital was chaos. When I tried to find them later, to thank them, the department said they had requested privacy. That was not exactly true." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. He placed it beside the photograph. "Do you remember the fire chief who ran that operation? Captain Marcus Webb? I remember everyone from that night. Webb claimed credit for the rescue. Said he personally pulled you and your daughter from the flames. Got a medal for it, a promotion. His face was on every news channel." Jack's voice was flat, factual. "He was not even in the building. He was outside, managing the perimeter. It was me, Davies, and Chen who went in. Webb showed up after, took our helmets, and walked out in front of the cameras." Elena stared at him. "That is a serious accusation. It is the truth. Why would he do that? Because 3 weeks earlier, he had refused to authorize a building inspection that might have prevented the fire. Because if the real story came out, people would ask why the fire happened at all. Because heroes are easier to believe in than negligence." Jack's jaw tightened. And because he could, Elena moved to the table, her fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. Why tell me now? Why like this? Because Chen is dying. Lung cancer from all the smoke he inhaled over the years. He has maybe 6 months. And before he goes, he wants the truth on record. Jack met her eyes. He has been trying to tell it for 10 years. Every time he does, Webb's lawyers shut him down. Defamation, lack of evidence. The department closes ranks. No one will listen to a retired firefighter with no proof. But they will listen to me. You were there. You saw who carried you out, who put the oxygen mask on your daughter, who stayed with you until the ambulance arrived. Jack's voice dropped. You are the only witness who matters, the only one whose word cannot be dismissed. Elena turned back to the window. Her reflection stared back at her, ghostly against the morning light. You threw coffee on me to get my attention. I wrote 3 letters. Called your office twice. I was told you do not accept unsolicited contact from the public. A bitter smile crossed his face. Turns out it is easier to spill coffee on a CEO than to get 5 minutes of her time. You could have been arrested. I am willing to risk that. Chen is willing to risk more. We have nothing left to lose. He paused. But you do. The statement hung in the air. Elena turned slowly. Is that a threat? It is an observation. Webb is connected. His brother sits on the board of 2 companies you are trying to merge with. His testimony is part of several high-profile cases. If I go public without you, without solid evidence, he will bury us, and then he will come after you for supporting us. Jack stepped closer. But if you speak first, if you tell the truth about what you saw that night, it changes everything. Elena's laugh was sharp. You are asking me to destroy my own deal, to alienate powerful allies, to potentially derail months of negotiation, all to help people I do not know clear the name of a man I have never met. No. Jack's voice was soft now. I am asking you to tell the truth about the night your daughter almost died, about who saved her life, about what that means. Silence fell again. Elena looked at the photograph, at the image of herself from 10 years ago, holding a child who had been so small and fragile in her arms. She remembered the smoke, the heat, the moment she thought they would both die, and then the arms that had lifted them, the voice that had said, "Keep breathing." I have got you, the face behind the mask that she had seen for only seconds before darkness took her. I did not recognize you, she said finally. It was 10 years ago, and a very short meeting. No. Elena shook her head. I mean, I spent months trying to find you. Searching. But the department told me the firefighters had declined public recognition. I thought you wanted to remain anonymous. I thought I was respecting your wishes by not pushing. Webb made sure we disappeared. Davies took a transfer to another state. Chen retired early. And I. Jack looked down. I left the department 6 months later. My marriage fell apart. I got custody of my daughter, and I tried to forget that night ever happened. But you kept the photograph. I did not keep it. I found it 2 weeks ago, in a box of Chen's things. He had been collecting evidence, quietly, building a case no one would ever see. Jack's voice roughened. He gave it to me before his last hospital stay. Said, if anything happened to him, someone needed to finish it. Someone needed to make sure the truth did not die with him. Elena picked up the photograph again, studying it more carefully. This was taken from outside the hospital room. Chen took it. He was checking on you, making sure you and your daughter were okay. He did not enter, did not introduce himself. Just needed to know you had survived. Something in Elena's chest tightened. She remembered the weeks after the fire, the terror every time her daughter coughed, the nightmares that still came occasionally. She remembered feeling so alone, even surrounded by doctors and nurses and assistants. And she had not known that somewhere in the building, A firefighter was watching over them, making sure they were safe. "What happened to Davies?" she asked quietly. "He is in Seattle, working construction. He wants no part of this fight. He has a family. He cannot afford to make enemies." "But you can?" Jack's smile was sad. "My daughter has a heart condition. She needs surgery we cannot pay for. I work 2 jobs, and it is still not enough. I am already drowning. The truth cannot make my situation worse." He paused. "But it might let me sleep at night. And it might let Chen die, knowing his name is cleared." Elena set the photograph down carefully. She walked back to the window, her mind racing through calculations. The merger, the board, the PR nightmare this would create, the allies she would alienate, the questions that would be asked about why she waited so long to come forward, and against all that, the memory of smoke and heat and a voice saying, "I have got you." "If I do this," she said slowly, "I need complete honesty from you. No more surprises, no more secrets." "Agreed. And I need time. I cannot just issue a statement. I need to verify facts, secure legal counsel, prepare for the fallout. Chen has weeks, maybe a month, but not more than that." Elena closed her eyes. "You are asking me to choose between the truth and everything I have built." "No." Jack's voice was gentle now. "I am asking you to remember what it was like to be powerless, to need help and have it come from someone who wanted nothing in return, to be saved by people who just did their job because it was the right thing to do." He moved closer to the window, standing beside her. "You have power now. You can protect yourself from almost anything. But Chen and Davies and I, we are still where we were 10 years ago. Still hoping someone with authority will listen. Still waiting for justice that never comes." Elena opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. Not at the waiter who had spilled coffee. Not at the supplicant asking for help, but at the man who had run into a burning building and carried out a stranger and her child without hesitation. "What is your daughter's name?" she asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Lily." "How old?" "7. The same age as my daughter was that night." Elena's voice was very quiet. "What is wrong with her heart?" "Ventricular septal defect, a hole between the chambers. It needs to be repaired surgically, but we have been waiting for approval from insurance. And even with approval, the copay is more than I can save." "How much time does she have?" "Her cardiologist says we should do it within the next year. After that, the risks increase significantly." Elena turned away from the window. She looked at Jack, then at the photograph, then at her own reflection in the glass. She thought about her daughter, now 17, healthy and strong and preparing for college. She thought about the nights she still woke up, gasping, dreaming of smoke. She thought about the firefighter who had checked on them in the hospital, making sure they survived, asking nothing in return. "I need to see Chen," she said finally. "I need to hear his story directly, and I need to verify everything you have told me. I can arrange that, and then I will decide what to do." Jack nodded slowly. "That is all I am asking. A fair hearing." "Nothing about this is fair," Elena said, but there was no heat in it. "You ambushed me in a public place. You forced my hand. I know. I should have you arrested. I know that too." Elena picked up the photograph one more time. She looked at the image of herself from 10 years ago, young and terrified and holding her daughter. She did not recognize that woman anymore. The years had made her harder, colder, more calculating. But somewhere inside, that mother still existed. The one who had begged anyone who would listen to save her child. The one who had promised she would spend the rest of her life being grateful if they would just survive that night. "Be at the hospital tomorrow," she said quietly. "St. Vincent's. Chen's room. 10 in the morning." She handed the photograph back to Jack. "Bring everything you have. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. I want the full story. And then I will do what I should have done 10 years ago." Elena moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Your daughter, Lily. Have her medical records sent to my office. All of them. Test results, doctor's notes, insurance correspondence, everything. Jack stared at her. Why? Because I pay my debts. Elena opened the door. And because no child should have to wait for help while the adults argue about money. She walked out before he could respond, leaving him alone in the conference room with the photograph and the faint scent of coffee that clung to her stained suit. Jack stood there for a long moment, his heart pounding. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed Chen's number. When the older man answered, his voice weak but alert, Jack said simply, "She is listening." The next morning, Jack arrived at St. Vincent's Hospital at 9:45. He had barely slept, running through everything that could go wrong, all the ways this could backfire. But when he reached Chen's room, he found Elena already there, sitting beside the bed, talking quietly with the old firefighter. Chen looked worse than Jack had ever seen him. Gray skin, oxygen tubes, machines beeping steadily. But his eyes were clear when he looked up at Jack, and there was something almost like hope in his expression. "Matthews," he said, his voice a rasp. "I was just telling Miss Fitzgerald about the night we met." Elena stood. She wore a simple black suit today, her hair down around her shoulders, looking somehow both more human and more formidable. "Mr. Chen has been very thorough. He has kept extensive records." On the bedside table, Jack saw a thick folder of documents, incident reports, photographs, witness statements, everything Chen had collected over the years, organized and indexed. "I also made some calls last night," Elena continued. "I spoke with the hospital director from that night. She confirmed that Captain Webb was not part of the medical briefing team, which he should have been if he was the primary rescuer. I spoke with the apartment building owner, who confirmed that Webb had refused the inspection request 3 weeks before the fire. And I spoke with my own daughter, who was old enough to remember some of it." Elena's voice softened slightly. She remembers a firefighter with kind eyes who held her hand in the ambulance. She said he sang to her. Badly. Jack felt his throat tighten. "That was me. I do not remember what song. I think I was making it up." She said it helped. Elena turned back to Chen. "Everything you told me checks out. The timeline, the radio logs, the inconsistencies in Webb's story. You were telling the truth." Chen's eyes filled with tears. "Does that mean you will help?" "It means I am going to do more than help." Elena pulled out her phone and made a call. "This is Elena Fitzgerald. I need you to schedule a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. City Hall. I will be making a statement regarding the Lexington Avenue fire from 10 years ago." She listened for a moment. "No, this cannot wait. Cancel whatever needs to be canceled. This happens tomorrow." She hung up and looked at both men. "I am going to tell the truth. All of it. What I saw. Who saved us. What Webb did. And I am going to call for a full investigation into the department's handling of the incident and the subsequent cover-up. The merger," Jack said quietly, "Webb's brother, will have to accept the consequences. Some things are more important than business deals." Elena's jaw set. "And if they try to use this against me, they will discover that I am very good at fighting back." Chen reached out with a shaking hand. Elena took it carefully, mindful of the IV lines. "Thank you," the old man whispered. "I just wanted people to know the truth before I go." "You are not going anywhere yet," Elena said firmly. "You are going to get better. You are going to see this through. And you are going to accept my gratitude properly." She squeezed his hand gently. "You saved my daughter's life. That is not a debt I take lightly." Over the next 24 hours, everything moved with startling speed. Elena's legal team mobilized, gathering statements and evidence. Jack was interviewed 3 times, his story recorded and verified. Davies flew in from Seattle, hesitant but willing to testify once he understood Elena was backing them. The press conference was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at City Hall, but that morning, everything changed. Jack was at home, helping Lily with her breakfast when the police arrived. Two detectives, formal and apologetic, with a warrant for his arrest. Jack Matthews, you are being detained for questioning in connection with assault and attempted extortion of Elena Fitzgerald. Lily started crying. Jack felt his blood turn to ice. There must be a mistake. No mistake. Miss Fitzgerald filed a complaint yesterday evening. You are being accused of deliberately causing her physical harm and attempting to leverage that incident to extract financial compensation and favorable testimony. The detective showed him the paperwork. Webb's law firm was listed as the representing attorney. They let him call his neighbor to watch Lily. They let him put on shoes. Then they took him to the station and put him in an interrogation room where he sat for 3 hours, his mind spinning. This was it. The retaliation they had expected, but faster and more vicious than anticipated. Webb had gotten to Elena, or scared her, or reminded her what she had to lose, and now Jack would take the fall for everything, would probably lose custody of Lily, would definitely lose any chance of helping Chen clear his name. The door opened, but instead of a detective, Elena Fitzgerald walked in. She looked furious. Not the cold, controlled fury from the cafe, but something hotter, more personal. She dropped a folder on the table in front of him. Webb's people moved fast, she said without preamble. They filed a false police report in my name claiming you attacked me and threatened me. They used forged documentation and a fake email account. My own assistant did not realize it was fraudulent until this morning when I asked about the status of the press conference. Jack stared at her. You did not file charges against me? Of course not. I am trying to help you. Elena pulled out her phone and made another call. This is Elena Fitzgerald. I am here at the precinct with Jack Matthews, who was arrested this morning on false charges filed by persons unknown using my identity. I need him released immediately, and I need to file a complaint against whoever is responsible for this fraud. She paused. Yes. I will wait. She sat down across from Jack, her expression tight. This is what he does. This is how he has gotten away with it for 10 years. He finds pressure points, and he squeezes until people give up or break. Will you give up? Jack asked quietly. Elena's smile was sharp. I do not give up. I get even. The door opened again, and this time a lawyer entered, one of Elena's people, already arguing case law and filing motions. Within the hour, Jack was released, but as they left the building, reporters swarmed them. Someone had tipped off the press. Questions flew from all directions. Miss Fitzgerald, is it true you had a waiter arrested? Are you pressing charges? What is your connection to this man? Elena stopped on the steps. Jack tried to move past her, to get out of the spotlight. But she caught his arm. Wait, she said softly. Then she turned to face the cameras. I am glad you are all here, she said, her voice carrying clearly. I was planning to make a statement this afternoon, but this seems like the appropriate time. She pulled out a piece of paper, unfolded it, and began to read. 10 years ago, on November 15th, my daughter and I were caught in an apartment fire. 3 firefighters from Engine Company 12 rescued us that night. Their names were Jack Matthews, David Chen, and Michael Davies. They risked their lives to save ours. They asked for nothing in return. Elena's voice stayed steady, but something in it deepened. But another man took credit for their heroism. Captain Marcus Webb claimed he personally performed the rescue. He received commendations and promotions based on a lie. And when the real heroes tried to tell the truth, they were silenced. The reporters were dead silent now, cameras rolling, every word being recorded. Jack Matthews, the man standing beside me, is one of those firefighters. He did not attack me. He spilled coffee on me to get my attention because every legitimate channel for telling this story had been blocked, because powerful people had decided that the truth was inconvenient. Elena looked directly at the cameras. I am here today to say that I remember that night. I remember who carried me out of that building. I remember who saved my daughter, and I will not be silent anymore." She folded the paper and looked at Jack. "This man is a hero, not a criminal, and anyone who tries to paint him otherwise will answer to me." The questions exploded. Elena ignored them, turning and walking back into the building with Jack beside her. In the lobby, away from the cameras, she stopped. "That was not the speech I had prepared," she said. "It was better," Jack replied, his voice unsteady. "Webb will not let this go. He will fight back. This is going to get worse before it gets better." "I know." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this? You could have stayed invisible, kept your head down, protected yourself and your daughter. Why risk everything for a man you barely know?" Jack thought about Chen in that hospital bed, about Davies, who had run away from his own heroism, about all the years of silence and the weight of a truth that no one wanted to hear. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "And because 10 years ago, I learned that sometimes the right thing is also the terrifying thing. But you do it anyway." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we do it together. And we do not stop until everyone knows the truth." Over the next 2 weeks, the story consumed the city. News outlets picked up the investigation. Webb's past was examined. Other firefighters came forward with their own stories of his intimidation and credit stealing. The department launched an internal review. The mayor called for accountability. Webb fought back viciously. He accused Elena of manufacturing a scandal to distract from her failing merger. He claimed Jack was an unstable ex-employee with a grudge. He hired the best lawyers and the best PR firms and tried to bury the story under a mountain of counterclaims. But Elena had been right. Together, they were stronger than the silence. Davies testified. Chen, from his hospital bed, gave a video deposition. Other witnesses came forward. And slowly, inexorably, the truth emerged. Not the dramatic, heroic truth that made good television, but the small, human truth about 3 men who had done their job and been erased for it. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after Jack had spilled that cup of coffee, Captain Marcus Webb resigned from the fire department. The same afternoon, the department issued a formal apology and announced that Chen, Davies, and Matthews would receive the commendations they had been denied 10 years earlier. Jack was at the hospital with Chen when they heard the news. The old man cried, his thin shoulders shaking with relief. "It is over," he kept saying. "It is finally over." But for Jack, something else was beginning. The next day, Elena called him. "I have been reviewing Lily's medical records," she said without preamble. "Her surgery has been scheduled for next month. Full coverage, no copay, no insurance fight. It is taken care of." Jack felt his knees go weak. "I cannot accept that. You already did. I paid your debt. Now let me pay mine." Elena's voice softened. "Besides, I am not doing this for you. I am doing it for Lily, and for my daughter, who would not be alive if you had not run into that building." "Thank you" seemed completely inadequate. Jack said it anyway. "There is one condition," Elena added. "You need to stop working yourself to death. I spoke with the manager at the Sterling. You have been fired, obviously, for the coffee incident. But I have a position available at one of my companies. Administrative support. Better hours, better pay. Health insurance that actually covers things. It is yours if you want it." Jack closed his eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because 10 years ago, 3 men saved my daughter without asking what I could pay them. Without demanding gratitude. Without calculating the value of her life against the risk to theirs. They just did it." Elena paused. "I am a businesswoman, Mr. Matthews. I believe in settling debts. And this is one I have owed for a very long time. Then I accept. And thank you. For everything. Do not thank me yet. Wait until you see what I am like as a boss. I am told I am somewhat demanding." Jack laughed despite himself. "I believe it. The surgery happened on a crisp morning in late November, exactly 10 years and 2 weeks after the fire. Jack held Lily's hand until the anesthesia took her under, then sat in the waiting room, his mind blank with fear and hope. Elena arrived an hour into the surgery. She sat beside him without speaking, just her presence a quiet support. When the surgeon finally emerged, smiling, with news that everything had gone perfectly, Jack broke down completely. Elena handed him tissues and did not say anything about the tears. She just waited until he could breathe again, then said, "She is going to be fine. You did it. You got her the help she needed. We did it," Jack corrected. "I could not have done this alone. No one should have to." They sat together in that waiting room, two people who had been strangers 3 weeks earlier, bound now by truth and survival, and the recognition of debts that could never fully be repaid. When Lily woke up, groggy and confused, but alive and already looking healthier, she smiled at her father. "Did it work, Daddy?" "It worked perfectly, sweetheart. Your heart is all fixed." "Good. Now can we go home?" Jack laughed, the sound breaking free of all the fear and tension. "Soon. Very soon." Elena stood in the doorway, watching them. Her daughter had texted her earlier, asking about the firefighter who had saved them, asking if she had ever thanked him properly, asking why it had taken so long to tell the truth. Elena had not had good answers then. But watching Jack hold his daughter, watching Lily's small hand grip his, she thought maybe she was beginning to understand. The truth was not just about facts or justice. It was about recognizing the connections between people, the debts and gifts that moved invisibly through the world, connecting moments and lives in ways that were easy to forget but impossible to erase. She left quietly, letting father and daughter have their moment. But before she went, she left an envelope with the nurse. Inside was a letter, handwritten, addressed to Jack. He found it later that evening, when Lily was sleeping peacefully, and he finally had a moment to breathe. The letter was short. "Mr. Matthews. Jack, I have spent 10 years building an empire, making deals, accumulating power. And in all that time, I forgot the most important thing I ever learned, that we are saved by people who owe us nothing. That heroism is not about recognition or reward. It is about doing what is right when no one is watching and no one will ever know. You reminded me of that, not with speeches or grand gestures, but by spilling a cup of coffee and refusing to let the truth stay buried. Thank you. For my daughter. For yourself. For all of us who need to be reminded that some things matter more than power. If you need anything, ever, you have only to ask. But I suspect you will not ask. People like you never do. Which is exactly why people like me need to remember you exist. With gratitude and respect, Elena." Jack folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. Outside the window, the city glittered in the darkness, indifferent and eternal. Inside, his daughter slept, her heart beating strong and steady. And for the first time in 10 years, Jack felt like he could finally breathe. He thought about Chen, who would live to see his name cleared. About Davies, who could come home now without fear. About Elena, who had chosen truth over power. About all the small moments that had led to this one, and he thought about that night 10 years ago, when he had been younger and married, and still believed that doing the right thing was always enough. When he had run into burning buildings because that was his job, when he had carried out a woman and her child, and thought nothing of it because that was what you did. He had spilled 1 cup of coffee. Such a small thing. Such a ridiculous, dramatic gesture. But sometimes, the small things mattered most. Sometimes, you had to make people look, had to force them to see what they had been ignoring, had to risk everything because the truth was worth more than safety. Jack looked at his daughter, safe and sleeping. He thought about the life ahead of her now, full of possibility instead of limitations. And he smiled. "We did it, Lily," he whispered. "We made it through." In the morning, they would go home. Jack would start his new job. Life would continue, ordinary and extraordinary, in the way that all lives are. But tonight, in this hospital room, with his daughter breathing easily beside him, Jack allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in years. Not just relief, not just gratitude, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you have done the right thing, regardless of the cost. The kind that settles in your bones and lets you finally rest. The kind that whispers, "This is enough. You are enough." Jack closed his eyes and let himself believe it. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, a father and daughter slept, their hearts beating in sync, finally free from the weight of worry that had defined them for so long. 3 months later, Jack stood in front of a crowd at the fire department's annual ceremony. Chen sat in the front row, oxygen tank beside him, but looking stronger than he had in months. Davy stood on the stage next to Jack, uncomfortable in his suit but smiling. And Elena sat in the third row with her daughter, both of them watching as the commissioner pinned medals onto the chests of 3 men who should have received them a decade earlier. The applause was genuine. No cameras this time, just firefighters and their families. Acknowledging what should have been acknowledged long ago, Jack looked out at the crowd and saw Lily in the back, her surgical scar barely visible beneath her collar, her face radiant with pride. This was not the ending he had imagined when he poured that coffee. He had expected anger, consequences, possibly jail. He had not expected medals or jobs or surgeries or any of this redemption. But life had a way of surprising you, he had learned. Of taking your desperate gestures and turning them into something larger than you could have planned. After the ceremony, people came up to shake their hands. Other firefighters who remembered the incident. Reporters who wanted follow-up stories. And Webb's former assistants, some of whom quietly apologized for their silence, their complicity, their fear. Jack accepted their apologies but did not forget. Forgiveness was easy in the bright light of vindication. The real test had been in the darkness, when speaking up meant losing everything. He understood why they had stayed silent. Fear was a powerful force, but so was truth when you finally found the courage to speak it. Elena approached as the crowd thinned. Her daughter walked beside her, taller than Jack had expected, with her mother's serious eyes and something softer around the mouth. "Mr. Matthews," the girl said formally, "I wanted to thank you properly. My mom told me what you did, both then and now." Jack knelt down to her level, even though she was almost as tall as he was now. "You do not need to thank me. I was just doing my job. That is what Mom said you would say." The girl smiled. "But I remember you. Not your face, but your voice. You told me a story about a dragon who was afraid of fire." Jack felt something catch in his throat. He had forgotten that. The ambulance ride, the terrified child, the ridiculous story he had made up to distract her from the pain and fear. Did the dragon ever get over his fear? "You said he did. You said he learned that sometimes the things that scare us are the things we need most." She glanced at her mother. "I think about that a lot." Elena's hand rested on her daughter's shoulder, and the gesture was so protective, so full of quiet love, that Jack had to look away for a moment. "Thank you for remembering," he managed. "Thank you for saving us." They stood there for a moment, the firefighter and the girl he had carried from the flames, connected by a night that had changed everything. Then Lily called out, impatient to leave, and Jack excused himself, but Elena caught his arm before he could go. "Wait. I have something for you." She handed him an envelope, heavier than the last one. "What is this?" "Open it later. When you are alone." Her expression was unreadable. "And do not argue with me about it. Consider it settled business." Jack wanted to protest, but something in her face stopped him. He nodded and pocketed the envelope, then went to collect his daughter. That night, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Jack finally opened the envelope. Inside was a check. Not for thousands or even tens of thousands, but for an amount that would cover Lily's college education, her medical expenses for years to come, a safety net that meant Jack could breathe without constantly calculating how many shifts he needed to work, how many bills he could delay, how close they were to disaster. There was a note attached in Elena's precise handwriting. "You gave my daughter her life. I am giving yours back to you. Not as payment. Payment would imply this is transactional. This is not business. This is what people do when they recognize that we are all connected. That what we do for each other matters. That debts of the heart cannot be measured in dollars, but must still be honored. Use this to live, Jack. Not just survive. Actually live. You have earned it 1,000 times over. And if you try to give it back, I will be extremely disappointed." Jack sat at his small kitchen table, the check in his hands, and felt the last piece of armor he had been wearing finally crack open. For 10 years he had been in survival mode, working, worrying, calculating, fighting, never resting, never trusting that things could be okay, never believing that help could come without strings attached. But here it was. Help. Real, substantial, life-changing help. From someone who understood that some rescues happen in burning buildings, and some happen in hospital rooms, and some happen in the simple act of seeing another person struggle and deciding to ease it. He cried then, not the broken sobs from the hospital, but something quieter. A release of tension he had been carrying so long he had forgotten it was there. A recognition that maybe, finally, he did not have to fight so hard. That maybe the world was not quite as hostile as he had learned to believe. In the morning, he called Elena. She answered on the second ring. "I cannot accept this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you can, and you will." She sounded amused. "Jack, do you know what I make in a year? No, more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. This money means nothing to me financially, but it means everything to me personally." Her voice softened. "Let me do this. Let me give you what you gave me. A future. A chance. Freedom from fear. I do not know what to say. Say you will take your daughter somewhere nice. Say you will stop working yourself into exhaustion. Say you will let yourself be happy." Elena paused. "Say you will remember that accepting help is not weakness. It is trust. And trust is what we give each other when we recognize our shared humanity." Jack closed his eyes. "Thank you. For everything. For believing me. For fighting with me. For this, thank you for spilling coffee on me." It was the rudest, most effective wake-up call I have ever received. They both laughed, and the sound was light, free from the weight of trauma and struggle that had brought them together. "Take care of yourself, Jack Matthews." "You too, Elena Fitzgerald." He hung up and looked around his small apartment. It looked different now, not bigger or fancier or changed in any physical way, but lighter somehow, as if possibility had crept in through the windows and made everything shimmer with potential. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy? Why are you up so early?" Jack crossed the room and picked her up, even though she was getting too big for it. Even though his back protested, he held her tight and thought about all the mornings he had woken up, terrified that he could not protect her, could not provide for her, could not be enough. "Just thinking about the future, sweetheart." "What about it? About how bright it is going to be?" Lily pulled back to look at him, confused by the emotion in his voice. "Are you crying?" "Happy tears," he assured her. "The best kind." "Oh," she considered this. "Can we have pancakes?" Jack laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "We can have anything you want," and for the first time in 10 years, he meant it. 2 weeks later, Jack gave his notice at the second job he had been working nights. He enrolled Lily in a better school, one with a nurse on staff and a program for children with medical needs. He took her to the park and actually had the energy to play instead of sitting on a bench watching with exhausted eyes. He started sleeping through the night, eating regular meals, remembering what it felt like to be a person instead of just a survival machine. Chen came over for dinner once a week, telling stories about the old days, teaching Lily card tricks, slowly regaining his strength. Davies visited when he was in town, and the three of them would sit on Jack's small balcony, drinking beer and not talking about the past, just existing in the present together. And once a month, Jack would get a brief email from Elena, nothing personal, just updates. How her merger had gone through after all, once she had proven she could not be intimidated. How her daughter had been accepted to her first-choice college. How she had started a foundation to support families of first responders, funding medical expenses and education costs for people who spent their lives saving others. Jack never replied with more than a few lines. "Thank you. That is wonderful. Congratulations." They were not friends, not really. Their lives were too different, their worlds too separate. But they were something. Witnesses to each other's courage. Proof that sometimes people surprised you. That sometimes the powerful chose justice over convenience. That sometimes one desperate act could change everything. One evening, nearly a year after the coffee incident, Jack was helping Lily with her homework when she asked, "Daddy, do you ever think about that day, when you spilled coffee on the important lady?" Jack looked at his daughter, her face serious with concentration, her heart beating strong and steady in her chest. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because I was scared that day. When the police came, I thought they were going to take you away forever." "I know, baby. I am sorry I scared you, but you had to do it, right? You had to make her listen." Jack set down his pen. "Yes. I had to try. Because some things are more important than being safe." "Where did you hear that?" "You say it. In your sleep sometimes. You say, some things are more important than being safe." Lily looked up at him. "Is that true?" Jack thought about that night 10 years ago, running into fire. About spilling coffee on a CEO. About all the moments when fear had demanded silence, and he had chosen to speak anyway. "Yes," he said finally. "It is true. Being safe is important. But being honest, being brave, standing up for what is right, those things matter too. Sometimes they matter more, even if you get in trouble." "Even then," Lily nodded, processing this. Then she went back to her homework, satisfied. But Jack sat there for a long time, watching her work, thinking about the lessons he was teaching through his actions, not just his words. He had not meant to be a hero, had not wanted to be a symbol or a story. He had just wanted Chen to get justice and his daughter to get healthy. Such small human wants, but somehow they had become something larger. A reminder that ordinary people could change things. That one act of courage could ripple outward in ways you could never predict. The coffee had been cold by the time it hit Elena's suit. He remembered that detail suddenly. He had waited too long, his hands shaking, his courage failing him over and over until finally he just did it. Closed his eyes and poured, and hoped that the desperate gesture would mean something. It had meant everything, not because it was elegant or well-planned, but because it was honest. Because it said, "I see you. I need you. I will risk everything to make you understand." And Elena, to her credit, had heard that message beneath the rudeness and the stain. She had listened. And in listening, she had saved him just as surely as he had once saved her. Jack stood and went to the window. The city spread out below him. Millions of lives intersecting and separating in patterns too complex to understand. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably working late, making decisions that affected thousands. Somewhere, Chen was sitting with his family, grateful for the time he had left. Somewhere, Davies was building something with his hands, content in his anonymity. And here, in this small apartment, Jack was helping his daughter with fractions and planning what to make for dinner and living the small, precious life he had nearly lost. He thought about that photograph, the one he had carried into the cafe that morning. He still had it, tucked into a drawer with other important documents. Proof of a moment when everything had changed. evidence of connection that transcended circumstance. But he did not need to look at it anymore. He carried the memory in his body now. In the way he moved through the world, with a little less fear, a little more faith, in the way he had learned to accept help without shame, in the way he had discovered that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let people see your need. "Daddy?" Lily called. "Can you check this problem?" "Coming, sweetheart." He turned away from the window, from the sprawling city and all its complexity, and returned to the simple arithmetic of his daughter's homework, to the ordinary magic of being present, to the quiet heroism of showing up, day after day, and choosing love over fear. The coffee had been cold. The gesture had been desperate. The consequences had been terrifying. But standing here now, in his warm apartment with his healthy daughter, Jack would not change a single moment. He had spilled 1 cup of coffee and washed away years of silence. Had taken one reckless chance and discovered that sometimes people rose to meet your courage with their own. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Outside, night settled over the city. Inside, a father helped his daughter solve for unknown variables. Both of them content in the knowledge that some problems had solutions, some debts got paid, and some truths, once spoken, could never be silenced again. And in the space between heartbeats, in the quiet moment before Lily asked her next question, Jack smiled. Not at anything in particular, just at the simple fact of being here, of having made it through, of being, finally and fully, alive.